I wrote a library called Strophe, which does XMPP stuff in JavaScript. And one of the things that I've just been working on adding is plugin support. So the plugin support for Strophe is inspired a lot by jQuery because Strophe itself is inspired by jQuery. And essentially, when you include the code for Strophe, you could just include code for plugins like you would a jQuery plugin. It'll be like strophe.plugin.js, and it'll add functionality to the library. So you can do a couple of things with this. Your plugin, when it initializes, you can add namespaces. So if you're writing a plugin for handling XHTML, then you might want to add the XHTML namespace to the library, and that's just pretty simple. And then any of these you can access from the normal namespace stuff in Strophe. And this is what you would call to add a plugin to Strophe. They're called connection plugins because they extend the connection object. So when you create a connection in Strophe, it goes through all of the connection plugins and instantiates them. So each connection has its own set of plugins. So if you set up handlers and stuff, they're specific to that connection. And then you can access all of the plugin stuff. So this is an example plugin called My Plugin, and all the plugins have this init function that gets past the connection, and they can do whatever they need to do. Of course, a more interesting plugin will have more stuff here. And so I wrote a little Identica microblogging plugin for this, and I'll show that to you guys. You guys all know what Identica is? And I'll, for those of you who don't know what Strophe is, I'll talk a little bit about how this code works. So here in the top, you can see I'm loading jQuery and the jQuery UI stuff. That's just for making it look nice. And then I load strophe.js, and then I load the plugin. When the plugin loads, as soon as it loads, I'll show you what the plugin code looks like. So we do add connection plugin. We're going to call this one Identica, and we use the little JavaScript module pattern to hide some private data here. But this is essentially the prototype of the plugin object. Is that right? No, that's the callback function, sorry. The prototype is down here a little bit. So this one's really simple. We just have that init. We store the pointer to the connection so we can do interesting stuff with it. And we set up a stanza handler for message stanzas of type chat. So anytime our connection gets a stanza of type chat, this plugin will handle it. Obviously, this is probably not the greatest if you've got a lot of other handlers, but this, for demo purposes, just handling all the messages works pretty well. And then whenever a message comes in and handles the stanza, this callback function will get notified, and it'll run. So we grab the from attribute, and we just make sure, we try to see if that's from Identica. If it is from Identica, we just return immediately. Returning true just means that the handler keeps going. It'll get new messages. If we return false, it takes it out of the handler list. If we do get a message from update.identica, which is where all the things come from, we search for the HTML payload inside the stanza, and we just basically just serialize that and throw it in a div with jQuery. So just really simple stuff. But the nice thing is that the users of the plugin don't have to do anything except for include the JavaScript code, and then their normal connections just get extended with this functionality. And here I've sort of hard-coded that class equals Identica to be where the code goes. And then if we look at the HTML for this, you can see here we have some jQuery tabs, and then in the second tab here, we have a div ID Identica. That doesn't seem right, but it seems like that's supposed to be class Identica. Hold on. You know what? That would be why my demo didn't work at JSConf. We'll fix that right now. Okay. So that's all set up. Tape is a little command I wrote that sets up a little web server with reverse proxy, so all of this just works. And we got a local host. Okay. So all this does, we're going to type in our XMPP credentials. Since my Identica stuff goes to my Gmail account, I'm going to log into my Gmail account here. And it's connecting to the XMPP server. And now it's waiting for messages. So yeah, so I'm going to go talk to myself here. I actually have Identica open down here. Let's look at here's the log of all the XML that's happening. We can scroll down. There's everybody's rosters. So it got the message. You can see right here. We got, hey, everyone. So maybe it actually showed up in the tabs now. Nope, it didn't show up. So that's probably the class issue. But you can see we got the message, and for some reason the plugin didn't handle it. So this is what happens when you give impromptu live demonstrations of new code. Any questions about Strophe or about the plugins?
So basically, if I understand well, Identica could just remove their bad UI and rely on anyone else building simple web pages where you could have your basically own Identica interface just using their XMPP backbone, right?
Yeah, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of people asking Identica to pay more attention to the XMPP side than the website.
So if someone had a little more time on their hands, they might make this plugin a little bit nicer so that whoever wants to make Identica clients on the web could just plug this in and it would work fine.
You can make a live Identica little widget.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In this case, it's just a static file, right? It's just HTML file. So basically, you could host it on S3 or any basic files.
Yeah, there's no server support required here. Yeah. The use case for the Strophe plugins is really sort of, Strophe basically allows you to create stanzas and allows you to handle stanzas. It's extremely simple. And so people always ask, like, does it support file transfer? Does it support pub/sub? So now we have a way for people to make, one of the plugins we'll be releasing when the plugin stuff hits the master branch is a pub/sub plugin that will handle subscription and unsubscription and retrieval of old nodes and stuff. So the very simple API of just send and add handler will get extended with stuff like con.subscribe and then a pub/sub node, and con.upsubscribe and then a pub/sub node.
And is there a library somewhere to learn how to write plugins for Strophe? Or, I mean, if I want to write a plugin, where should I start?
Looking at this presentation online, probably. The slides and the code are up on SlideShare right now. And then I'll probably blog a more thorough tutorial about how to write a plugin within a couple of days. Yep.
How are disco nodes added to the service discovery?
So service discovery would be something that someone would write a plugin for. So strophe.disco, and then you would have things like query and items, maybe like con.query and con.items.
So the plugin would have to use another plugin for the
So yeah, you would load the plugin, and then your normal connection code could just use the things done by the plugin. So you wouldn't have to worry about what XML you have to build to do a disco query. All you would need to know is the service name and the node.
Well, I mean, but for publishing, so that other people can say, oh, like you support, pub/sub, or you support like a muck client.
Oh, you mean receiving disco requests? Yeah. So the same disco plugin could also have handlers for that stuff. For instance, for IQ get and set, and be able to do that. Or maybe whoever writes the disco stuff will do it in two pieces, where there's a disco publisher and a disco client.
But there's no like specified API for having a plugin say, hey, this is what needs to be added so that other people can know that I support this, like a whiteboard.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So.
And you wanted that plugin so whenever it's loaded up, people could disco you and say, oh, you guys support whiteboards.
That's a great idea. So it sounds like one of the base plugins that we should have is a features plugin, so that other plugins can do something like add feature, similar to add namespace. And actually, maybe that add namespace call will just turn into that.
There's other disco nodes that you might want to add, like forms.
Yeah. I'm hoping that the community will come up with plugins for everything. And certainly, like, we'll be writing plugins for a lot of stuff, especially for pub/sub, which we use heavily. So, okay, thanks.